Welcome to the Black Doctoral Network's weekly web series, Conversation Starters. I'm your moderator, Dr. Kimberly West, and I am delighted that you are joining us as we address multi-generational workplace issues. During this episode, we will discuss the multi-generational workforce's impact on organizational culture, various strengths and challenges associated with the multi-generational workforce, and strategies for addressing multi-generational workplace issues. Our guests for this episode bring a wealth of knowledge, expertise, and experience of today's topic. Let's get the conversation started by introducing our guests. Our first guest is Dr. Amy Freeman. A native of Topeka, Kansas, Dr. Freeman knew that she wanted a career that would allow her to help others and advocate for disadvantaged groups. She decided to focus her career in the field of human resources with a specialization in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Dr. Freeman believes that if businesses would focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, they would have increased productivity and overall success. Dr. Freeman holds her bachelor's degree in business administration from Friends University, a master's degree in human resource management from Keller Graduate School of Management, and a doctoral degree in business administration from Liberty University. She is a certified Master Career Services and is certified in diversity management. Also, Dr. Freeman has a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. Dr. Freeman works for a public sector organization as a manpower analyst, and she launched her career coaching and HR consulting business, Thrive Beyond, in 2017. Welcome, Dr. Freeman. I'm excited to meet you tonight.
Thank you for having me, Dr. West.
Yes. Dr. Isaac David is our second guest this evening. I'm sorry. Yes, Dr. Isaac David. Or Dixon, I'm sorry. Dr. Dixon Dr. Dixon has been an active participant in the advancement of the human resource profession, working in both the private and public sectors in Oregon for more than 30 years. He owns and operates a consulting firm dedicated to advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in organizations of all sizes. He also is an adjunct faculty member of long-standing at Portland State University, where he teaches human resources related courses. Dr. Dixon also chairs the board of directors of one of the oldest agencies fighting homelessness in Portland, Oregon. Dr. Dixon received his PhD in philosophy with an emphasis in organization and management HR from Capella University, his Master of Arts in Interdisciplinary Studies, Organizational Communication from Merrill Hirsch University, and his BS in Business Administration from Warner Pacific University. He is also a lifetime member of the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. Welcome, Dr. Dixon. It is great to have you this evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Nice to join both of you.
All right. So, Dr. Freeman and Dr. Dixon, I hope you're excited to get the conversation started.
Yes.
I want to pose the first question to you, Dr. Freeman. What are some prevalent issues that occur amongst the multi-generational workforce?
So, according to Pew Research Center, we currently have 5 generations in the workforce. We have the silent generation that only makes up less than 2% of the workforce because they are around 75 years older. Then you have the baby boomers who are nearing retirement, and they make up roughly about 25 to 30% of the workforce. While Generation X, they make up 30 to 35%. And millennials, they make up about the same as Generation X. And then you have Generation Z, who's entering the workforce. So they make up about 5% or less. So the issues that are faced have a lot to do with work ethic and values across the generations. So based on a recent study conducted by Purdue University Global, the silent generation, they're dependable, straightforward, they're tactful, and they're loyal. And that's basically what employers want in an employee. but they are older and they're leaving the workforce. So then that brings on baby boomers who they are optimistic, they're competitive, they're workaholics, and they're team oriented. Um, and being optimistic, it can be a good thing. However, it may not be ideal since so many organizations are facing numerous challenges within the workforce. And being a workaholic, it's not ideal for generations after the baby boomers. So Generation X, they're flexible, they're informal, they're skeptical, and they're independent. Which, let's face it, nowadays we have to be flexible, right? So with everything going on in the world, and while some companies try to keep things formal, a lot of the United States workforce, they're teleworking. So while you have to keep things professional, it's within an informal capacity. And so millennials, they're competitive, right? And then they are civic and open-minded, and they're achievement oriented. So they are always looking for the next best thing. So they may not stay in a position long, because their goal in life is to achieve their own goals by any means necessary. And then you have Generation Z, who they're global. They have an entrepreneurial mindset, and they are progressive, but they tend to be less focused. So with Generation Z, where would that lead the big corporate and the public sector organizations? So with all of those with all those generations intertwined at an organization, it can either be a good thing because you have a diverse group within the scope of age differences and different mindsets, or it can be, it could lead to a disaster if they do not know how to interact with one another.
All right, I'll just confess really quickly. I was very interested in this topic as someone who is in the workplace and works with people across the spectrum. And so I like that you kind of described the different groups that are out there, because I was thinking, yeah, I see that. Dr. Dixon, what do you think are some prevalent issues that occur amongst the multi-generational workforce?
I want to thank my colleague for sort of framing this question by talking about and describing the different generations. I think what's happened across the generational spectrum, regardless of their age, is the deal has changed. The employment deal has changed. The security has changed. The benefit packages, the pay, and that's gotten to everyone. Um, and I've seen the Pew research before. I think, like most research, it frames things in a way that it seems transitory, but it seems fixed, but it really isn't, because those people that are in the boomer generation, like myself, that should be retiring, many of them can't. Many of their jobs have disappeared. And so they find themselves going into the workforce again, looking for additional work, looking for more work in order to retire. And the relationship between employer and employee has changed because of the added stress of all of those things. And I know that, I'm teaching my HR courses at Portland State University. I teach evenings. And so I have a multi-generational classroom. And the views about what work means, the relationship to power and authority, those things are all very different depending on, when you were born, how you were programmed, the world you grew up in. And I see some real interesting discussions. We try to keep them civil, but
Yeah.
I see some real interesting discussions just based on age and experience. And I think that is what organizations are having to contend with, is that there's all these different expectations about relationship to leadership, relationship with other employees, the right way to run things up the chain and the wrong way to do that, or even if you're running it up the chain at all, instead of posting it on social media.
Mm.
Because we have many institutions that are being run by people who seem to not understand that everybody is carrying a computer in their pocket and everybody is a photojournalist.
Mm. Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's some real interesting challenges for folks who are in HR or employee relations or even running a company, regardless of size. Um, as my colleague pointed out very nicely at the beginning, it's all a different view of the world based on when you were born and the experiences that you've had growing up.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think even just talking with some of my younger colleagues, I think like I had made a comment one time. I said, you get to a certain age and things like retirement and benefits mean something. And they looked at me like, what? And I just said, okay.
Yeah,
So,
one of my wife's nieces said several years ago, she was talking to us about old people. And she said, and I said, what do you mean by old people? She said, like 30. She just turned 40 yesterday. I sent her a little text that said, how's it feel to be old?
how's it feel to be old?
That's right.
I want to come to you, Dr. Dixon, with the next question. How has the multi-generational workforce influenced organizational culture?
Well, I think it's influenced organizational culture in what I like to capsulize three different ways. One, people are increasingly finding their own voices at work.
Mm.
And in many top-down organizational cultures, this has been very difficult.
Mm.
I talk to HR professionals that work in government agencies, and they're really struggling with this because you talk about top-down, bureaucratic, you got to run it through 20 levels to get it to somebody.
Right.
And some of their newer employees just, it doesn't work. And
Mm.
so they're finding themselves having to revamp and revise their systems
Mm.
because they're having talent walk away because people go, I can't do this. Um, Second, we also do not adequately prepare frontline leaders for the challenges associated with a multi-generational workforce.
Mm.
They're still trying to manage like it's 1950,
Mm.
and
Mm.
they've got a 2021 workforce, and the two don't mesh.
Mm.
And you end up with conflicts in the workplace. You end up with people being on performance improvement plans, all this craziness, because we're not preparing them adequately for the challenges that are coming.
Mm.
Mm.
I know in higher ed, titles, roles, and reporting structures don't build consensus.
Mm.
And it feels very autocratic to people. It feels like somebody's playing hide the ball with them. Um, those things, those kinds of institutions have to change. And I think finally, from my point of view, this shift in workplace values is being driven by younger workers around the globe.
Mm.
It's not just a United States issue.
Mm.
My that remark is driven by over the last couple of days, I've been reading a report from the Edelman Consulting Group called their 2021 Trust Index.
Mm.
And I'll be sure to send you the link to it. It is a fascinating study that they've been doing for decades, and the trust in public institutions has fallen, but
Mm.
Mm.
that trust has migrated over to companies,
Mm.
and people are squarely looking at their managers, supervisors, and leaders in those organizations to be trustworthy and to follow through. If they don't, as we have seen just this week with John Gruden and the Las Vegas Raiders, you get called out.
Yeah.
Mm.
And, as I said a moment ago, everybody's a photojournalist
Yeah.
or they've recorded something. I mean, the days of, having to, put it in an envelope and mail it to somebody and waiting to see if you
Mm.
get a response, those days are over.
Mm.
Yeah.
And right or wrong, people come to the workforce with that kind of consumer-based experience outside. And if
Mm.
they walk into our organization and we make them fill out forms with a clipboard and a pen, or some nonsense, they go, what is this?
Yeah.
You know, you were selling one thing, but you're doing something else, and
Mhm.
that's never a good way to start off a relationship with an employee.
Mhm.
So what I hear you saying is triplicate forms are no longer acceptable. No. Make sure you press really hard.
Got to use a number two pencil or a
Yeah,
flat pen.
Right.
exactly. Dr. Freeman, go ahead. What do you how do you think this multi-generational workforce has influenced the culture of organizations?
Sure. So Dr. Dixon brought up some very good points, and I agree with you. So I believe organizations have found a way to support the differences across the multi-generational workforce, and it's not because they wanted to; it's because they had to.
Mhm.
So most companies were forced to change their organizational culture because there are so many differences with the generations in the workforce that have to align with society. So let's be honest here. Just recently, and I'm talking about less than 30 years ago, leadership in most companies, they were predominantly non-minority, non-female leaders because they did not want to embrace change, diversity, equity, or inclusion. Um, so I feel that Generation X and more so Millennials and Generation Z, they're not having that. They're not standing up for that. Um, Although the percentage of disadvantaged groups um, in leadership roles, it's low right now. But the percentage is increasing, but there is still a lot of work to be done, of course. That's why you see a lot of organizations. They're hiring minorities, especially like minority women, for human resource leadership roles and diversity, equity, and inclusion leadership roles because they're trying to understand how to change the organizational culture, as a matter of fact. And so they want that to align with society in order to benefit their workforce that can consist of a diverse group of individuals within their organization.
Wow. So the next question, I'll just put it out there and let you jump in, either Dr. Dixon or Dr. Freeman. What are some of the benefits and challenges associated with an age diverse workforce?
So I have a lot to say on this topic. Okay, so the benefits associated with age diverse workforce is that you're able to have different perspectives that consist of traditional practices or processes to modern practices and processes. In one of the SHRM, Society of Human Resource Management Foundation executive briefings, it was stated that an employee's experience and knowledge increases with age as time goes by, right? So, however, someone that is young and they have talents and skills, they shouldn't be held back because of their age. And research has proven time and time again that any form of diversity, and this includes age, can improve organizational performance. And given the different practices associated with the organization, it can also decrease employee turnover. That's why it's so important for organizations to have a mentorship program, right? So within an organization, those that are younger can learn from those that are older and vice versa. Now, some of the challenges associated with the multi-generational I'm sorry, with the age diverse workforce. So basically, it has to do with like communication style and then age discrimination, and that's going both ways. Perspectives on diversity, and then a misunderstanding of a particular generation. So what we all should agree upon is that we can discuss the different generations, right? And we assume that individuals act a certain way just because that's how society perceives them, right? Because of their generation. But let's take, for instance, the silent generations, right?
Mhm.
Their communication style is going to be different because they're more of personal touch and handwritten notes. So they probably won't utilize email. And then with the baby boomers, and let me go back, the silent generation, they're probably not, you know, they probably don't, they don't believe in diversity. And that's probably just because of the generation they grew up in.
Mhm.
Now, baby boomers are probably used to like phone calls and then face to face interactions, and they probably are skeptical about diversity. Generation X, they're the same way with the communication styles, but they do believe in diversity. Millennials, their communication style, it consists of what we always see: instant text, instant messages, text messages, and emails, because that's what they grew up on. And of course, they're all for diversity, because millennials love a challenge. And then right now, diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's a challenge for the workforce, right? And then Generation Z, their communication style, of course, text message, instant messages, and they love social media. So when it comes to diversity, diversity is the key factor of what motivates Generation Z. So having all these differences amongst the different generations can be challenging.
Mhm. Wow. Let's say you, Dr. Dixon, what do you think about some of those benefits or challenges associated with it?
Well, you know, my experience prior to going into corporate America and then later into higher education, I was a commissioned officer in the United States Army for 14 years.
Hmm.
So I commanded infantry companies. The average infantry soldier is 18 to 26. From small towns, they're from inner city neighborhoods. They're black kids, they're white kids, they're country white kids, they're city white kids, city black kids, entirely different. And you always had to deal with what you said, how you said it, what they understood you to say. Um, and I learned a long time ago that getting everybody rowing the boat in the same direction is the most difficult job that any frontline leader can have. So organizations have to make diversity, equity, inclusion part of their strategic plan, part of their mission, vision, and values. And the objectives that are associated with that and the measures of success have to cascade through the organization. If you don't do that, um, it is another project
Mm,
that when the budget gets tight, guess where the first red line goes?
yeah.
And that's where the skepticism comes in. Because some of us, you know, if we're baby boomers or even the generation just behind baby boomers, have lived through this more than once.
Yeah.
And if you've been in companies that have been downsized, the first thing that happens is training and development and the associated things. In the old days, it was affirmative action and
Mm,
you know, other programs that were trying to help women and minority group members advance. Those programs got cut.
Mhm.
So you only have to see that movie a couple of times, and then you just lose interest.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I have had that conversation with more than one young person who said, "Oh yeah, my mother or my dad told me about that, and
Mm,
I'm not falling for that same okie doke."
Mhm.
So that's where some of the skepticism comes in on the part of Gen Zs. Um, the other thing that's happened in their lifetime, and I'm talking about our Generation Ys, Generation Zs, and Millennials, they have lived through two different recessions already.
mm,
That's
And
true.
so their trust level for anybody or anyone in a position of authority is pretty minimal.
Mhm.
You have very little leeway with them, and that's where a lot of the skepticism
Mhm.
and so forth comes from. Um, they have watched people, many cases their own relatives, that
yeah.
have worked 15 or 20 years for the same company get bounced out on the street with little or no notice. It's one of the reasons that 41,000 people quit jobs just in the last quarter. It's one of the reasons that people that look like all of us are chartering businesses in record numbers. One kid told me, and I say kid because everybody's a kid to me now. I'll be 70 soon. And he said to me, I decided to start my own business because the next time the bus goes over the cliff, I'd rather be behind the wheel than the passenger in the back.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I heard that statistic this week too about the percentage of people who quit. And just trying to, in my mind, because I'm not particularly in this field, trying to figure out where do they go. And it was, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Right.
There is
Well,
this.
just remember 10 years ago, the gig economy didn't exist.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's right.
And this even, and listening to both you and Dr. Freeman, just thinking about even loyalty as you talk,
Yes.
that whole idea of being loyal to a company, looking forward to the bonuses or the mug or whatever,
Right.
that is gone by the wayside. Would you say that's pretty, this with these generations. So thinking, and companies facing these challenges, what are some strategies to increase employee engagement among this multi-general workforce? So what can organizations do? Dr. Dixon, what do you think they can do? Or what do you suggest?
Oh, you're right in my wheelhouse here because I teach a performance management and a compensation strategies course, and the bottom line for me, the genesis of a good relationship between an employee and an employer is be honest and open about what the organization needs to achieve and what the measures of success are going to be. Cascade those goals and objectives from the organization's strategic plan into everyone's job description and evaluation. I mean, everybody from up at the top all the way to the janitor. The closer the connection, the more people tend to buy in. Train managers to check in with employees frequently and to listen and act on their feedback. This is the biggest change. We all grew up in the days of the annual performance review, or as I call it, the annual litany of sins. I did something back in January. You're telling me about it in December. How can I fix that?
Right.
These young folks now, if you don't talk to them about not only their performance, but where their career is going at least 3 to 4 times a year, they're gone.
That's true.
I've watched it as a AVP of Human Resources at Portland State before I retired, and I watch it as a consultant. I don't understand why they left. I said, when's the last time you talked to them about what their career looked like, where they were going to go, how were they going to get there, what resources you're going to put at their disposal? Well, we never talked about that.
Yeah, which is different than my generation, I guess, because we would go into a job, and I don't want to say what generation that is. It's not somewhere in there. But we would look at a job and say, okay, I could see the path, right? And we would kind of work towards that path.
Well, that's because organizations were constructed much differently then.
Yeah.
And you had a lot of things that were linear.
Yeah.
So you went from grade 4 to grade 5 to grade 6. But now that's not how it's more like this. So I call it career lattice rather than career ladders.
Okay. What are some strategies you would recommend, Dr. Freeman, or suggestions you would give?
Well, I want to touch on the fact of course, employee experience. So I looked at a study from Cornell University, and they did state that 8 out of 10 executives rate employee experience from important to very important. And then only 22% reported that their companies were excellent at building differentiated employee engagement. So within that study, some strategies to increase employee engagement among the multi-generation workforce, it consisted of communication, accommodating different learning styles. And I think that's a big one. Training for eliminating stereotypes, like I had just discussed previously, and then being flexible and facilitating mentoring. So we all know that communication is key. because that's the only way we can understand one another or understand our differences. And then that's also how we learn to respect those differences, right? So when we analyze each learning style, we must come to a consensus of what style we will work, how we will work it for that situation or the process at hand. So organizations should continuously train their employees. I'm a big a big fan of training. I am, because when organizations continuously train their employees about the differences and misconceptions of the different generations, that can be done through diversity, equity, and inclusion training. And I think most organizations have learned that within this past year and a half. And they had to learn how to be flexible in providing their employees with different or multiple working options, right? So either you can work from home, or you can work in the office a couple of days and then go home for the next to telework. So as I stated before, mentorship programs are also vital within an organization, because everyone can learn and receive information from a mentorship program. And, it also helps build relationships. So with all that being said, organizations should always have different metrics in place to measure employee engagement in order to see what aspects are doing well, and then what they're needing to improve on.
Wow. Now, I will say this next question is, when I think about this next question, I think about technology. And considering what you've been saying about these various levels of generations and their, how they associate work based upon maybe their generation, how can human resources best attract, recruit, and retain age diverse talent? So, Dr. Freeman.
Okay, sure. So first and foremost, an organization's human resource department, they have to have a plan in place. They can't just say that they attract, recruit, and retain age diverse talent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So once that plan is in place, then training needs to be conducted amongst leadership and the hiring managers. So a lot of people are always wondering, like, what kind of training can they do? So the training that can be provided is defining diversity and inclusion training, unconscious bias training, and then belonging training. So defining diversity and inclusion training, that will take you through what diversity and inclusion is and the true meaning of the practice or quality of including people from different backgrounds or cultures. And then a well-developed unconscious bias training, that will provide information about conscious and unconscious bias in order for one to differentiate between the two. And then an individual will learn how to reduce the impact of those biases when they interact with others. The belonging training, it will provide information about individuals having a true experience within the workplace of being accepted and included. And that's what I want people to understand. Inclusion and belonging are two different things. And that's why they have different trainings for them. So once the leadership team and hiring managers are provided with thorough training, they will understand what they need to do in order to have a diverse team and to see that it's beneficial for the organization. And then they can work with the human resource department on the recruitment strategies, which can consist of posting a job announcement where they can attract that age diverse talent, right? And so for most companies, they utilize an application tracking system. So it's up to the human resource department to ensure that the application tracking system that's in place is beneficial, and then it aligns with what they're trying to do in order to recruit and age diverse talent. So everyone has to work together to retain age diverse talent. And although most companies only conduct exit interviews, right, when they're losing that talent, companies actually need to conduct stay interviews with their current employees. And then in order to, with that, they'll get a better idea of why people are staying with the organization and what the organization can do to improve on retaining age diverse talent.
Yeah, that's interesting. A stay interview.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. If companies, I would do more of that. Yeah, that would be.
Yeah. So a lot of companies don't, or they're not aware of it. But if you do a stay interview, um, you get that one-on-one time with the employee, and then they're telling you, hey, what's working and then what's not. What are they seeing when they're working within their teams or working within the organization. So it is actually vital to do a stay interview, and that way you can retain your workforce.
Dr. Dixon, what suggestions, or how can human resources best attract this diverse workforce out here and even retain them?
Well, I think I mean, first of all, I agree with everything that my colleague said. I think the important thing is that the cornerstone for any human resource function to not only be effective, but to be a strategic partner in the organization is they got to be data driven. I've seen way too many human resource departments in organizations, large, small, public, private, doesn't matter. They're still engaged in mostly functional activity, tracking people's hours of work, their benefit plans. I mean, those things are important, but so much of that work that's transactional activity, and that's been automated. If that stuff isn't automated in your organization, you are way behind the times. Because remember, your clients, your consumers, your employees, all the same thing, just different names,
Right.
have the consumer experience outside, and they walk in the door in the morning and it's 1970. And that alone, especially some of your younger employees, they will only put up with that so long, and they will tell you goodbye. So I think the organization's got to be clear that seeking the best talent, regardless of age, is paramount. And developing relationships with different communities, different community groups and leaders and so forth is critical. Because when those groups tell people that XYZ is a good place to work, I know because I know so-and-so there, they're more apt to apply or at least check you out online and see if you're a place where they want to work. Some industries really struggle with this because of long-held perceptions about the industries. High tech, for certain kinds of folks, that hasn't necessarily been a welcoming environment, and still isn't in some cases. And so, no matter the source, people are increasingly reading online reviews of companies before they decide to apply or to talk to somebody.
Yes.
That didn't exist before. You used to have to wait for the Sunday paper, then you'd read the ads,
Right.
and you'd have to sit down and type it. Those days are over. We keep acting like they are. We try to replicate online what used to happen. That's crazy. When I ran the internship program at Nike, for 4 years I ran that program. I had 100 interns every year. And I used to get 3,000 applications for 100 spots. And I'd go through and I'd read every resume. I'd conduct video interviews. How I decided where those interns would go is I would look for the best leaders in the different business units to come forward and tell me why they wanted an intern. And then I made them have some skin in the game. They'd have to put up some money to subsidize that intern's salary and housing for the entire summer. Once that intern had interned with us for 1 or more years, that manager was not going to let them to go to work anyplace. Adidas, no. Columbia Sportswear, not going to happen. Because they knew the intern, they knew their story, they knew their family. There was this linkage and this bond.
Mm.
And one of my interns, a young fella I had the first year who interned a couple of years, a young kid out of Philadelphia, wanted to be a designer. He
Mm.
ended up being the lead designer in all of Brand Jordan.
Oh, wow.
We would have never seen him had it not been for that internship program. Nike gets 7,000 unsolicited resumes and applications every day.
Hmm.
Mm.
So your chances of walking through the front door there and getting a job are like zero.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Wow.
That's why, as you said earlier, Dr. Freeman, internship programs, mentorship programs can make a world of difference.
Yes. Yes.
And it speaks to those processes you talked about, how you have to have those updated processes because there's no way you can manage that many resumes and applications
Oh,
on some antiquated come in and use that clipboard and fill out this piece of paper
Oh yeah, I
system.
mean that's why so many industries are struggling now. I mean their systems, their
mhm,
HR systems are antiquated. HR
mhm.
departments generally are understaffed and overworked.
Mm.
Yes.
And then you give them these old systems. It's like swimming across San Francisco Bay with an anchor tied to your neck.
Mm.
Mhm.
Um, we have to have cloud-hosted automated systems because the stream of data from the application form, the
Mhm.
application becomes the employee record, becomes the payroll record, becomes the benefit. That's
Mhm.
one stream of data. It doesn't take 12 departments handling that separately.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
That's
And
true.
every time I work with a client, I try to get them to understand that by automating those things, yes, some people's jobs may change and or be eliminated, but you can repurpose those jobs in doing things like engagement work and diversity and equity and inclusion work, other stuff that is of greater strategic long-term value than filling out forms.
Yeah. Oh,
Mhm.
yeah. I'm sorry. Did you want to say something, Dr. Freeman? Because I'm just like, as someone who's not particularly in this field, I just think about, again, going back to what you said about the various um, age groups, and just I can see that struggle to do that conversion
Yes.
to, well, what do you mean?
Yes.
You know, because there are people who were like, oh my gosh, this is going to put me out of a job. You know, if we
That's
do
right.
X,
That's
Y, and
right.
Z, if we convert, you know, to these new
At a
processes.
college where I worked, we implemented a cloud-hosted system. And the first year, all people were screaming and hollering that we don't like this. 2 years after we went live, the director of facilities called me one day and said, "Come over to the warehouse. I want you to see something." So I walked across campus and uh, he took me in the warehouse and turned on the lights. And from front to back were filing cabinets that had been returned from all these departments on campus because everything was
Wow.
online.
Mhm. Mhm.
We cut our usage of paper and toner by 60% in 1 year.
Yep.
Wow. And that's a savings
And the
of
satisfaction and usage went through the roof. People
Mhm.
could use the system on their phone. They could use the system on a tablet. They could use it on. It's like, and the younger employees were going, duh.
Right.
And that speaks to Dr. Freeman. If you just let them go ahead and soar with their tablet,
Right.
right? Instead of
Right.
saying, no, you haven't been here enough, you know, they would have been like, we could have told you so, but you
Right.
don't do
Well,
that.
Dr. Freeman talked about something earlier too that I did want to pay tribute to. I have said for over a decade, ever since the advent of distributed computing, there should not be a traffic jam hour or rush hour in any major city in the world.
Mhm.
The last 18 months have proven that people can be productive working from home.
Absolutely.
Let's stop just driving across town, paying for parking downtown, costuming for work. It's
Mhm.
crazy. It's
It
just
is.
absolutely insane. There's no need for many knowledge-based jobs to function that way any longer.
That's right.
And if employers don't get on board with that, those
Mhm.
employees will walk.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Some landlords
Absolutely.
might not like you right now, Dr. Dixon. Those people that own those businesses, those buildings, they might be like, don't
But
listen.
it's true. It's
But
true.
no, I
Everything
get it.
that
Yeah.
yeah, everything Dr. Dixon is saying is true.
Yeah, no, and as you said, the pandemic has shown us that, yeah, that the
Mhm.
overhead and all that can be absorbed by the worker in a sense
Absolutely.
because you're staying home.
Well,
Absolutely.
that's why so many companies, I was reading an article in the New York Times a week ago about the Empire State Building.
Mhm.
And the $2.1 billion in economic impact that visitors going to the observation deck
Mhm.
spread throughout the borough where that is located. Well, that's fallen by half,
Mhm.
and 112 employers that rent space in that building have given notice that they will not return,
Wow.
Wow.
or they will significantly downsize their footprint.
Hmm.
Wow.
You know, it's that everybody keeps talking about going back to normal. Normal's gonna look different.
Yeah.
It sure is.
Yeah.
It
It
sure
will
is.
be.
It'll look different.
And you know, it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It just is.
Yeah. It's just a thing. Yeah.
That's
And
true.
I think a lot of people, and especially a lot of our younger employees, if we're working in traditional agencies, we have to spend time with those stay interviews. We've got to
Yes.
spend more time talking with them routinely and regularly about their career and where they're going, what they need to get there, the
Mhm.
resources that we're going to put at disposal to help support them.
Absolutely.
Because if we don't have those conversations, they will go somewhere else.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Wow. This has been a great conversation. And so, um, just want to ask you, and I'll start off with you first, Dr. Freeman. How has your affiliation with the Black Doctoral Network helped to enhance you personally and or professionally?
So the Black Doctoral Network, it has personally and professionally helped me because it provides a platform for me and my peers to share our ideas, information that we have obtained through other organizations or through research. It also provides different opportunities to promote my career coaching and HR consulting business to individuals that may need my services. I love the fact that the Black Doctoral Network does different podcasts and web series that address real world matters. The Black Doctoral Network has different events that individuals or organizations can get involved in, whether it's recruiting events or conferences. But I can honestly say by joining this organization, this year has been one of my best decisions that I've made.
Wow, that's great to hear.
Yes,
Dr.
ma'am.
Dixon, what about you? How has your affiliation with BDN helped to enhance you personally and or professionally?
Well, I think the Black Doctoral Network for me personally has been a godsend. You know, I live in Portland, which is one of the whitest major cities in America,
Mhm.
and this affiliation has given me a place to commiserate with others, learn from their experiences. The ability to have a place where you can let your hair down and discuss issues that are common to those of us who are Black that have doctoral degrees has been very helpful.
Wow. Very, very, very well said both. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Freeman. Thank you, Dr. Dixon. This has been a very insightful conversation. I'm sure it has been for those who are watching, but for me in particular, now I won't look at some of my coworkers and go, oh man, they're crazy. I understand them a little bit better now, right? There's some
Right.
generational differences that we have, but there are also some commonalities that we share. So I just want to say thank you again for such a thoughtful and wonderful conversation. Can you please tell everyone how they can get in contact with you? I'll start with you, Dr. Dixon, this time. How can people get in contact with you?
Well, you can email me at isaac at pdx.edu, or you can reach me via my website, www.vista, V-I-S-T-A, hrconsulting.com.
All right, wonderful. Dr. Freeman, how can those who are interested in getting in contact with you, how can they contact you?
So I have two different websites. You can either go to dramyfreeman.com, that's DRAMYFREEMAN.com, or to my business website for my career coaching and HR consulting, and that's thrivebeyond.com. Thrive is with two I's, so it's THRIVEBEYOND.com. Or you can definitely look me up on LinkedIn at Amy Freeman Amy Freeman MHRM. And then you can email me at amy.freeman@thrivebeyond.com.
Wonderful. So I thank you again for your for sharing your expertise with us this evening. Thank you, those of you who are watching this episode of Conversations. Be sure to join us again next Thursday at 7 p.m. for more insightful and thoughtful conversation.
Thank you.